The courthouse held its breath as the morning sun bled through frosted glass, painting long shadows over the solemn faces inside. No one dared speak. Judge Rowland's gavel slammed onto the mahogany bench with a crack that sliced the silence in half. Even seasoned attorneys flinched. The defendant, a young man named Daniel Harlan, sat rigid, his hands trembling atop the defense table. He did not look up. Anna Parker, lead prosecutor, fixed her gaze on Daniel, her eyes cold with years of practiced resolve. Anna said, "The people demand answers." Her voice reverberated through the room, hinting at secrets not yet spoken. Daniel's mother, Margaret, clutched a faded handkerchief in the gallery, her knuckles white. The court stenographer's fingers fluttered over the keys, capturing every whispered fear. The defense attorney, Jacob Flynn, leaned toward Daniel, his voice low but urgent. Jacob said, "Whatever you're hiding, it ends today." Overhead, fluorescent lights flickered, fighting against the gray morning. Daniel's jaw clenched. He glanced at the jury, ordinary people thrust into a storm of doubt. The air vibrated with expectation. Anna's lips pressed into a hard line. The judge surveyed the courtroom, his expression unreadable. A hush fell again, as all waited for Daniel to speak. But he only stared at his trembling hands. The trial of a lifetime had begun, with a silence no one would forget. A silence heavier than steel gripped the room. Judge Rowland's eyes never left Daniel, who stared at the surface of the table as if answers might materialize in the polished wood. Anna Parker spoke again, her words cutting through the haze. Anna said, "You know why you're here, Daniel." The young man's lips parted, but his voice faltered, lost beneath the hum of fluorescent lights and the shallow, desperate breaths of those watching. Margaret's chest heaved as she stifled a sob, her hope teetering on the edge of collapse. Jacob Flynn shifted, glancing up at the judge, searching for any sign of mercy. The jury waited, an island of uncertainty in a sea of fear. The prosecutor's table, piled high with files, cast long shadows, symbols of secrets and burdens carried into this moment. Daniel pressed his fingers together, searching for courage. Anna's eyes never wavered. The world outside felt impossibly distant, the only sound the distant toll of a city bell. Inside, justice and fate hung in a balance thinner than glass, ready to shatter with a single word. The courtroom's clock ticked on, marking each second as if every heartbeat was evidence. Anna Parker moved deliberately, a file clutched in her hand. Anna said, "This is more than a trial, it's a reckoning." Daniel closed his eyes, face contorted in pain, as memories threatened to burst forth. Jacob Flynn gripped his pen tightly, knuckles whitening as he prepared to defend his client against an onslaught he knew was coming. Margaret's tears now fell unchecked. The jurors exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the gravity of what was about to be revealed. Judge Rowland adjusted his glasses, his voice cold and formal. Judge Rowland said, "The court will hear opening statements." Tension coiled tighter, snapping through the air as Anna stepped forward. Each movement, each breath, felt measured, a ritual at the edge of chaos. In this room, no truth could remain hidden for long. Anna paused, drawing in a deep breath as she prepared to address the court. Anna said what happened that night was not an accident, it was a choice. Her words hung in the charged air, rippling through the gallery. Daniel's face turned ghostly, fear flickering in his eyes. Margaret wept silently, each sob muffled by the crowd. The jurors leaned forward, their curiosity sharpened by the weight of accusation. Jacob Flynn scribbled notes, mind racing to construct a defense against an avalanche. Judge Rowland's gavel rested heavily in his hand, as if ready to strike at the slightest provocation. Even the stenographer's rhythmic tapping seemed to pause, held captive by Anna's conviction. The city's distant sounds faded, replaced by the electric hum of dread. Anna's gaze never left Daniel, her voice both an accusation and a plea for truth. She set the tone for a trial that would spare no one. As Anna's opening faded, Judge Rowland nodded toward Jacob. The defense attorney stood, smoothing his jacket, every motion careful, deliberate. Jacob said, "The truth is never simple." His voice was calm, but edged with desperation. Daniel met his eyes, searching for reassurance in the sea of judgment. Margaret clasped her hands in prayer, rocking gently. The jury watched, wary and alert, every gesture scrutinized for meaning. The gallery held its collective breath, united by dread. Jacob moved to stand before Daniel, his silhouette framed by the sunlight, spilling across the floor. The trial barely begun, already felt like a war fought with secrets. As Jacob opened his mouth to begin the defense, the gravity of what was at stake pressed on every soul present. In this crucible of justice, the first cracks had already begun to show. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly, as Anna Parker opened her case with quiet precision. She laid out a timeline, each event sharper than the last. Anna said, on the night in question, every second mattered. Her voice cut through the murmurs like a blade, commanding the room's full attention. Daniel's eyes flickered nervously toward the prosecutor, his jaw clenched tightly. The jurors leaned forward, absorbing every word, the weight of suspicion growing heavier with each detail. Jacob Flynn sat motionless, calculating his next move. Outside, the city's bustle seemed miles away, swallowed by the courtroom's heavy oak walls. Margaret gripped the bench, eyes wet but determined. Anna's narrative was clear. This was no accident, no misunderstanding. It was a web of choices, consequences, and secrets waiting to be untangled. Judge Rowland watched with cool detachment, his fingers steepled under his chin. The trial's momentum shifted, and the silence deepened, pregnant with impending revelations. Anna's voice lowered, deliberate and cold, as she recounted key moments from the night. Anna said, witnesses placed Daniel near the scene, not as a victim, but as a suspect. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's face drained of color. Margaret bit her lip, fighting back a sob. Jacob rose swiftly, eyes blazing with urgency. Jacob said, "We will prove those accounts are flawed." The judge tapped his pen, signaling the tension's rise. The courtroom felt smaller, walls closing in on Daniel, as shadows deepened under the flickering lights. Anna paced slowly, her heels clicking like a metronome of impending doom. The prosecutor's evidence was methodical, surgical, designed to dismantle Daniel's defense before it even began. The jury exchanged uneasy looks, caught between doubt and the harsh weight of accusation. Every heartbeat echoed in the room, counting down to truth or ruin. Jacob Flynn stood, voice steady but edged with desperation, addressing the jury. Jacob said, "Assumptions are dangerous. The truth lives in the details." His eyes locked on Daniel, a silent promise to fight. Daniel's fingers twitched, trying to still the rising panic. The gallery whispered softly, some nodding, others skeptical. Margaret's silent prayers filled the air like a fragile shield. Outside, rain began to tap rhythmically against the courthouse windows, a cold reminder of the storm within. The judge adjusted his robe, signaling the shift toward defense. Jacob's words were a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters, a fragile hope amidst the looming storm. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes game of justice and secrets. Jacob unfolded a series of photographs, each one a fragment of the story he intended to rewrite. Jacob said, "These images will show you what others overlook." His voice was calm, convincing. The jurors leaned in, intrigued, despite themselves. Daniel glanced up, hope flickering briefly in his eyes. Anna narrowed her gaze, ready to counterattack. Margaret wiped her tears away, holding on to every word. The courtroom air thickened, as if the walls themselves awaited the unveiling of truths buried beneath layers of fear and deception. The rain outside intensified, streaking glass with relentless urgency. Judge Rowland's expression remained unreadable, a silent judge of not just law, but fate. Every photograph was a key, and the locks on this case were about to be tested. As Jacob's defense unfolded, tension spiraled higher. Anna countered with sharp objections, each cutting the air like a whip. Judge Rowland banged his gavel, restoring order but failing to quell the storm. Daniel sat frozen, caught between hope and despair. Margaret's whispered prayers grew louder in her heart. The jury's expressions flickered between confusion and resolve. Outside, thunder rumbled, shaking the courthouse with nature's own verdict. The courtroom became a battleground of words and wills, where every glance and gesture carried weight. Anna's voice rang out again, cold and unyielding. Anna said, "Justice demands clarity, not shadows." The trial was no longer just legal, it was a crucible forging destinies. In this charged space, secrets fought desperately for survival. The courtroom fell into an uneasy hush as the first witness took the stand. Detective Laura Mills, 38, tall with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, adjusted her badge before meeting the jury's gaze. She spoke clearly. "The evidence we collected points directly to Daniel's involvement." Daniel's face tightened, every muscle rigid with fear and disbelief. Anna Parker nodded subtly, seizing the moment. Jacob Flynn's jaw clenched, fingers gripping the edge of the defense table. Margaret sat upright, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through stained glass, coloring the room with muted reds and golds. The jury watched Mills' every word, absorbing the weight of her testimony. Judge Rowland leaned forward, his expression unreadable. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if the very walls waited to see whose truth would prevail. Detective Mills' voice cut through the silence, her words a sharp blade carving the case's next chapter. Detective Mills produced a set of photographs, her voice steady and unwavering. Detective Mills said, "These images reveal inconsistencies in Daniel's alibi diet." Gasps rippled through the courtroom as jurors leaned in closer. Daniel's hands trembled visibly, his gaze flickering toward Jacob. The defense attorney whispered urgently, "We'll expose the truth beneath their claims." Margaret's eyes filled with silent tears, her hope battling despair. Anna's lips pressed into a thin line, preparing for her next move. The courtroom was alive with whispered speculation, the tension tightening like a noose. Judge Rowland's gaze remained fixed, his presence a quiet reminder of the stakes. Outside, dusk settled, casting long shadows across the room. The battle for innocence or guilt was no longer a distant concept. It was unfolding, raw and unforgiving. Jacob Flynn rose, determined to challenge the prosecution's narrative. Jacob said, "Facts can be twisted, but truth withstands scrutiny." He paced slowly, eyes locked on the jury. Daniel's fingers clenched in silent resolve. Margaret's breathing steadied, hope flickering again. The courtroom's mood shifted subtly, a tentative reprieve from the relentless pressure. Anna watched, calculating, ready to counter. The judge cleared his throat, maintaining order but revealing nothing. Outside, the city's evening lights began to twinkle, a stark contrast to the courtroom's heavy gloom. Jacob's voice grew firmer, weaving a story of doubt and alternative explanations. Every word was a strategic strike, aimed at peeling away layers of accusation and fear. The jury's faces showed flickers of reconsideration. The battle was far from over. Jacob introduced a surprise witness, Elena Torres, a 29-year-old female with cautious eyes and an uncertain smile. Elena's testimony promised to shift the trial's balance. Jacob said she was there that night and saw what really happened. Elena's voice was soft but resolute as she recounted details that contradicted the prosecution's story. Anna's expression tightened, bracing for impact. Daniel's shoulders relaxed fractionally, relief mingling with lingering doubt. The jury exchanged stunned looks, whispers barely contained. Margaret wiped a hopeful tear from her cheek, clinging to this fragile new lifeline. Judge Rowland listened intently, the courtroom hanging on Elena's every word. Outside, a gentle rain began tapping on the windows like a steady heartbeat. This testimony was a crack in the fortress, one that could bring salvation or collapse. The courtroom buzzed with renewed energy as Elena finished her testimony. Anna rose sharply, ready to dismantle the defense's hope. Anna said, "The truth is not so easily rewritten." Her voice carried a razor's edge, cutting through the fragile calm. Daniel sat rigid, bracing for the counterattack. Margaret's hands trembled in her lap, silent prayers building. Jacob prepared for the next wave, determined but wary. The judge's gavel hovered, ready to restore order in this escalating battle of words. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, the storm mirrored inside the courtroom. Every moment, every statement pushed the trial closer to a breaking point. In this crucible, justice was forged by fire, and no one emerged unchanged. The courtroom air grew colder as new evidence was introduced. Anna Parker stepped forward, holding a USB drive with deliberate precision. Anna said, "This contains footage never before revealed." Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief, his pulse quickening. Margaret's fingers tightened around the pew, knuckles white with tension. Jacob Flynn rose, face pale but resolute, ready to challenge this unexpected twist. The jurors shifted uneasily, sensing the stakes rising with every second. Judge Rowland's gaze was sharp, demanding silence. Anna connected the device, and a flickering screen came alive, casting eerie light across the room. The video began, shadows moving, whispered voices, a truth hiding in plain sight. The courtroom leaned in, caught between revelation and doubt. Daniel's breath hitched, the fragile thread of hope unraveling before their eyes. The grainy footage played slowly, revealing fragments of a shadowed figure moving through a dimly lit alley. Anna narrated softly, noticed the hesitation, the hand reaching for the door, the look over the shoulder. The jury's eyes narrowed, tracing every movement. Daniel's jaw dropped slightly, disbelief flickering across his face. Jacob whispered urgently, "There's more to this story." Margaret covered her mouth, caught between hope and fear. Outside, storm clouds gathered, heavy rain tapping against the courthouse windows. The tension inside mirrored the tempest outside. The video was a puzzle piece, shifting the trial's balance precariously. Anna's voice dropped lower. "This is the moment the truth begins to crack." The courtroom seemed suspended in time, caught in the fragile space between revelation and ruin. Jacob rose with renewed vigor, voice steady but urgent. Jacob said, "This footage is incomplete. A fragment, twisted by perspective." He stepped toward the jury, eyes bright with conviction. Daniel's shoulders squared, a spark of determination igniting. Margaret's gaze lifted, hope rekindled. Anna's posture stiffened, calculating her next move. The judge tapped his pen, signaling order but also tension. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, a distant warning. Jacob's words carved through the courtroom like a beacon in fog. He promised a fuller truth, one that would clear Daniel's name. The jurors exchanged glances, caught between doubt and belief. The trial, already a tempest, seemed ready to erupt anew. Secrets poised to explode. Jacob called a surprise witness, Marcus Green, 45, a rugged man with steady eyes and a guarded demeanor. Marcus took the stand cautiously, voice low but clear. Marcus said, "I saw what really happened that night." The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Anna's expression hardened, recognizing the threat. Daniel exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and anxiety. Margaret's eyes sparkled with cautious hope. The jurors leaned forward, hungry for this new testimony. Judge Rowland maintained silence, the calm before a possible storm. Outside, rain pounded harder, windows rattling with the growing tempest. Marcus's story was a lifeline, a thread that might unravel the prosecution's case. But the truth, as always, was layered, waiting to be uncovered in full. Marcus detailed the night's events with gritty clarity. Marcus said, "Daniel was nowhere near the crime scene when it happened." The courtroom gasped collectively. Anna's lips tightened, ready to dismantle this claim. Jacob nodded quietly, steady but wary. Margaret's trembling hands clasped tighter. The jurors whispered, caught in the sudden shift of belief and doubt. The judge's gaze pierced the room, weighing every word. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the courthouse in stark bursts. Inside, the battle for truth raged louder, a war fought in whispers and revelations. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law, It was a crucible where fate, justice, and secrets collided. Every soul present was changed, caught in the trial's relentless grip. The courtroom held a brittle silence as the judge called for a recess. Judge Rowland said, "We will reconvene in 30 minutes. Daniel exhaled slowly, exhaustion shadowing his youthful face. Margaret leaned forward, clasping his hand tightly, her eyes full of both fear and fierce hope. Anna Parker gathered her notes with practiced precision, already calculating her next strategy. Jacob Flynn sat back, rubbing his temples, silently urging Daniel to stay strong. The jurors exchanged looks filled with mixed emotions, doubt, sympathy, confusion. Outside, gray clouds thickened over the city skyline, the impending storm mirroring the turmoil inside. The heavy oak courtroom seemed to close in on everyone, the weight of impending decisions palpable. Each person grappled with their own fears and suspicions, knowing this break was a fleeting respite from a trial that promised no easy answers. In the quiet of the hallway, Daniel and Jacob exchanged low, urgent words. Jacob said, "You must tell me everything, Daniel, no more secrets." Daniel hesitated, eyes flickering with fear and guilt. "I'm scared, Jacob," he admitted softly. Margaret's voice came from nearby, steady but trembling. "We're all scared, but we face this together." The weight of truth pressed on Daniel's shoulders, threatening to crush him. Jacob placed a firm hand on his client's shoulder, anchoring him. The courthouse buzzed faintly around them, footsteps, distant voices, but in this small space, time seemed to slow. Outside, rain began again, tapping a steady rhythm on the stone steps. The fight for truth was no longer just about law. It was a battle for survival, trust, and redemption. Back in the courtroom, Anna addressed the jury with renewed vigor. Anna said, "The truth is complicated, but it will come out, piece by piece." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Daniel met her gaze briefly, a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. Jacob prepared his next argument, knowing this was the moment to shift the tide. Margaret sat upright, gripping her chair as if it were a lifeline. The jury's expressions fluctuated between skepticism and cautious interest. Judge Rowland observed, his fingers steepled, weighing every nuance. The atmosphere was taut, every breath and glance heavy with unspoken tension. The trial was no longer just a contest of facts. It was a crucible where character and truth would be forged anew. The courtroom waited, suspended on the edge of revelation. Jacob rose, voice steady but edged with urgency. Jacob said, "You must question what you think you know. Look beyond the surface." He paced slowly, connecting with each juror's eyes. Daniel's expression softened slightly, a flicker of hope emerging. Margaret breathed deeply, her faith rekindled. Anna's jaw tightened, preparing to respond. Judge Rowland's presence remained a calm anchor amidst the storm. The city outside buzzed faintly, unaware of the drama unfolding inside these walls. Jacob's words were a beacon for doubt, a challenge to the prosecution's certainty. The courtroom became a battlefield of wills, each side seeking the fragile truth buried beneath layers of fear and deception. Every gesture, every word mattered in this high-stakes dance of justice. The day waned, shadows lengthening as the courtroom prepared for closing arguments. Anna's voice was crisp and commanding. Anna said, "Justice is not about sympathy, it's about truth." Daniel's heart pounded, the weight of every accusation bearing down on him. Margaret's whispered prayers filled the space between words. Jacob steadied himself, knowing the final battle was at hand. The jury sat poised, burdened with a decision that could change lives forever. Judge Rowland called for order, his gavel striking like thunder. The trial's final act was beginning, a collision of hope and despair, truth and lies. Outside, twilight painted the city in muted blues and grays. Inside, every soul awaited the verdict, holding their breath for the justice that might or might not come. The courtroom held its breath as the jury filed back in, their faces unreadable masks. Judge Rowland's voice broke the silence. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Daniel's heart pounded fiercely against his ribs, each beat echoing like thunder. Margaret gripped his hand, her knuckles white with tension. Anna Parker stood poised, eyes sharp and unblinking, ready for victory or defeat. Jacob Flynn straightened his tie, fists clenched beneath the table, summoning every ounce of hope. The jurors seated themselves slowly, the weight of their decision pressing down like a storm cloud. The courtroom was still, the air thick with anticipation. The foreperson cleared their throat, voice steady but laden with gravity. "We have reached a verdict, Your Honor." A hush fell, a moment suspended in time. Daniel's world narrowed to a single breathless instant, the silence before the storm. The foreperson stood unfolding the slip of paper with trembling hands. Every eye was fixed on this singular moment. A verdict that would reshape lives forever. The room seemed to shrink, breaths held collectively. Judge Rowland leaned forward, voice calm but commanding. "Will the defendant please rise?" Daniel rose slowly, feeling the weight of every soul in the room. Anna's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Jacob's jaw tightened in silent prayer. The foreperson cleared their throat again, voice steady and resolute. "Woo, the jury find the defendant." A pause, thick and unyielding, rippled through the courtroom. Margaret's grip tightened, her heart caught between hope and dread. Time itself seemed to freeze, a fragile thread ready to snap. The verdict would shatter illusions, reveal truths, or condemn silence forever. The words fell like a hammer. Guilty. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, as if a physical blow had landed. Daniel's knees buckled slightly, breath caught in his throat. Margaret's eyes welled with tears, her hand trembling violently. Anna's lips curved in a faint, victorious smile, but her eyes held a shadow of sorrow. Jacob's face tightened, disbelief and heartbreak colliding. The jurors looked away, some faces blank, others etched with regret. Judge Rowland nodded solemnly, his gavel raised but momentarily paused. The heavy silence that followed screamed louder than any verdict. Daniel's world shattered, the promise of justice slipping through trembling fingers. The courtroom was a crucible of crushed hopes, where every soul bore witness to the fragility of truth and consequence. Judge Rowland's gavel slammed down, cutting through the charged silence. Judge Rowland said, "The court thanks the jury for their service. Sentencing will be scheduled." Daniel sank back into his chair, hollow and defeated. Margaret's sobs broke free, echoing softly through the chamber. Anna folded her arms, the victory bittersweet. Jacob reached for Daniel's hand, squeezing it in silent support. The courtroom slowly emptied, each person carrying the weight of the day's judgment. Outside, rain began anew, falling steadily against the courthouse steps. The verdict was final, but the story was far from over. In this moment, justice felt both delivered and denied, a paradox as heavy as the silence that followed. Every heartbeat echoed the question, what comes next? Outside the courthouse, Daniel stood alone beneath the gray sky, rain drenching his hair and clothes. His breath came in shallow bursts, every drop of rain a cold reminder of shattered dreams. Margaret's voice called softly from behind, "We fight on, Daniel, for the truth, for justice." He turned slowly, meeting her steady gaze. Jacob joined them, offering a small weary smile. The fight was far from over. This was only one chapter in a larger war. The city's distant hum was a reminder of life beyond these walls, a world waiting to be reclaimed. Daniel's eyes hardened with new resolve. The trial had tested him, broken him, but it had not defeated him. Justice might have faltered today, but the truth was not yet silent. Their journey was just beginning. Days after the verdict, the courtroom was silent but heavy with unspoken questions. Daniel sat alone in the holding room, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across his weary face. Margaret's soft footsteps approached, bringing a fragile comfort. She said, "This isn't the end, Daniel. We'll find a way." Jacob entered quietly, nodding in agreement. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to their struggle. But inside this small room, hope flickered stubbornly, a defiant ember amid despair. Daniel's voice broke the silence. "I won't let them silence the truth." The weight of defeat pressed on him, yet something stronger was rising, a fierce determination to fight beyond these walls. This was not just about one trial, but a battle for justice itself. A fight that would test every bond and belief. Anna Parker sat in her office, reviewing case files under the glow of a desk lamp. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of triumph and doubt. She muttered to herself, justice was served, but at what cost? The city's distant sirens echoed, a reminder of the world beyond her courtroom victories. Anna's fingers traced the edges of the files, memories of the trial flooding back. Somewhere deep inside a question lingered. Had the truth truly emerged, or was it buried beneath layers of compromise? Outside her window, rain blurred the city lights into streaks of red and gold. Anna's gaze hardened. The fight was never truly over. She would keep searching for answers, for closure, for redemption. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, their voices rising in a chaotic chorus. Margaret stood silently, surrounded by flashing cameras and questions. A reporter pressed, "What will you do now, Mrs. Harlan?" Margaret's voice was steady but fierce. "We fight on. For Daniel, for truth." Daniel emerged, walking tall despite exhaustion, his eyes scanning the crowd with newfound strength. Jacob followed, quietly flanking them. The media frenzy swirled, but beneath the noise was a quiet resolve. This moment was not an ending, but a rallying cry. Justice may have faltered, but their story was far from finished. The world watched, captivated by the courage of those who refused to be silenced. Later that night, Daniel sat by a rain-streaked window, the city's glow casting shifting patterns across his face. He whispered into the darkness, "This is only the beginning." Margaret joined him, offering silent comfort, their hands brushing lightly. Jacob called with news. A potential new witness, a thread to pull. The fight stretched beyond verdicts and walls. It was a war waged in shadows and whispers, where truth was fragile and elusive. But Daniel's resolve burned brighter than ever. Together, they would unravel every secret, confront every lie. In the quiet night, hope was no longer a distant dream, it was their weapon and shield. The story's final breath was a whisper between three souls united by pain and purpose. Daniel said, "No matter what comes, we stand together." Margaret's eyes shimmered with tears. Jacob's nod was firm and resolute. Outside, silence stretched, deep and echoing, a pause heavy with promise and uncertainty. This was not the end, but a threshold. The gavel had fallen, but their fight for justice would echo beyond any courtroom, beyond any verdict. In the stillness, a new chapter awaited, fragile, dangerous, and utterly theirs to write.